Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for part two of our Honda Talon shootout. So we first want to start off by apologizing. This part two should have been out a while ago, but there's been one issue after another from when we took this to Moab and then we came back to Texas. Just finding the right schedule, the right roads for us to be able to do so many different runs has been a little challenging, but we got it done and we're delivering this video to you. So we thank you for being patient and we hope that you enjoy it and find it informative. That being said, the results are in. I'm holding them in my hand right now. But before we get into the results and we start putting some numbers on the board, I want to first talk about the machine that we have here. So we have a Honda Talon, a 2020 Honda Talon 1000X4. So this is a four-seater version, okay? And so it may be a little bit slower than a two-seater version, but we're working with what we have here. Everything on the machine is basically stock, except for it has an intake on the throttle body spacer. It's not a spacer, but the throttle body plate is a Pwr Tune throttle body plate. It's bored out a little more, so it does have that. It has an HMF slip-on exhaust, and that's the extent of the performance modifications we have on this machine. So as you can see here, we tested both with the 28-inch tires, which are the stock wheels and tires, to get a good baseline, and then we have the 32-inch tires that we made some runs with. The 32-inch tires that we used are ITP Terra hooks paired with some Alba Racing wheels. So they're very light. They weigh roughly about the same as we have on the stock setup, but they're obviously much taller. So those are the two different tire sizes in relation to the machine that we have run. And we obviously have a windshield. A windshield does make a little bit of a difference as it's running down the road. And so keep all of those things in mind as we start to make our way through these results. The next thing I really quickly want to touch on, we already did in part one, but in case you're joining us only for part two, is the pricing of the different competitors here. So we have Cops at $350, and they offer several different tunes inside of that price point. Hess is $150 for the tune, or $100 if you purchase the PV3 from them. Pwr Tune is $100 per tune, and FCP is also $100 per tune. So these two have several different tunes available, up to 6 or 7 tunes available. And if you purchase all of those tunes from them, they'll give you a pretty steep discount for purchasing all of them. Everybody on this board has access to the DynoJet PV3, which you'll need in order to load these custom tunes onto your machine. Another thing to note about every single one of these competitors is that they'll work with you on your tunes. So they have out-of-the-box tunes that are available for the type of riding and the type of horsepower that you want to make on these machines. But if there's something that needs to be tweaked, you can engage any of these companies and they'll get right on it. They'll make the tweaks that you need on your machine within reason and send you back the file, load it onto your machine, and then you'll start to see those changes on the machine. All of these guys have been in racing for a very long time, so you know we're confident with the people that we have up on the board. As we make our way down, we're going to have on the board, I'm going to list 20, 40, 60 mile an hour, 60 foot, and 1/8 mile times. But if you go to our website at Run Wild Powersports, not only will you be able to see more detail, so you'll see 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then the 60 foot and 1/8 mile, you'll see a little more detail on there. You can also buy a very cool Honda Talon shirts, both the 1000X and the 1000X4, shameless plug. All that being said, I think it's time to get into the runs. And so we're going to start with the 28-inch tires. We're going to do the stock run and then put up some numbers on the board. Let's take a look. So we're back after our first run and we take a look at our stock times. To 20 mile an hour, we have 1.41 seconds. 40 mile an hour, we have 3.69 seconds. 60 miles an hour, 7.90 seconds. 60 foot at 2.81 seconds. And the 1/8 mile at 9.98 seconds and it hit that at 65.42 miles an hour. Again, the miles per hour and more of the information you can find on Run Wild Powersports. But we have a lot of tunes to get to here, a lot of videos, so we're just going to run through these videos one by one, throw the numbers up on the board, and at the end we'll talk a little bit about it. So enjoy the next video. So we have our second competitor on the board, actually our first competitor on the board, our second time, and we're starting to see a little bit of a improvement over stock. Not a huge improvement, kind of making our way toward the end. We have 1.38 seconds at 20 miles an hour, 3.66 at 40, 7.8 at 60, 2.18, so the same 60 foot, and then 9.97 1/8 mile at 65.81. So 0.4 of a mile an hour faster hitting the end of the 8th mile. But if you remember from part one, Cops is the one that has the least amount of horsepower out of all of the competitors here on the dyno, at least. And you know, judging by the curve, the dyno curve, this looks about accurate. So let's make our way down to Hess and let's see what kind of times they put up. So now we have our next competitor up. We have Hess, and they put up a 1.41 seconds to 20, 3.63 to 40, 7.80 to 60, 2.18 60-foot time, and 9.97 quarter mile. So we're starting to see the numbers be pretty close. One thing I want to make sure to mention, specifically on the Hess compared to the others, if you watch the video, you rewind a little bit and watch it, from the takeoff, it falls a little flat before it starts going. That affects all of these times coming down through the line. Many or all of these providers can give you a launch controls to where you can launch the Talon. I didn't want to throw that as an additional factor into these times. We'd have to have multiple boards. This video would be hours long, and it just would be too much time to test all these things. So these are just from foot is on the brake, let go, press the gas all the way, and these are the numbers that we get. It's a good baseline. There are things that can be improved, like doing a launch, but I'm willing to stand by these numbers. As we make our way down, you'll start to see some more differences, especially when we get to the 32-inch tires. But let's take a look at Pwr Tune and see what kind of numbers they put up. That run was fast. So we can take a look here and see that Pwr Tune put up a 1.37 to 20 mile an hour, 3.51 to 40, 7.61 to 60, 2.16 60 foot, and 9.90 at 66 miles an hour even for the 8th mile. So Pwr Tune is very aggressive. The shifting is very aggressive, and when it shifts, you can really feel that pull sticking in the power curve. So I really enjoyed the Pwr Tune. So let's move on to the next one, the last one on our 28-inch tires, Florida Cracker Performance, FCP. Let's see what kind of numbers they put up. So the last competitor is on the board with our stock tires. We have FCP coming in at 1.38 seconds at 20, 3.63 at 40, 7.66 at 60, 2.14 on the 60 foot, and 9.89 seconds at 66.03 miles an hour on the 1/8 mile. So we have it really tight over here at Pwr Tune. There's a pretty stark difference right here. We kind of have pretty close to stock up here, up at the top three. And then down here, we have really starting to see some aggressive numbers. And if you remember, these two are the ones that made the most horsepower on the dyno. So we're going to switch out our 28-inch tires for 32-inch tires, and let's see what kind of numbers that we put up. The very first run is going to be the stock machine on 32-inch tires. Let's take a look. So we have our stock baseline numbers here, and as you can see, we have 1.59 seconds to 20 mile an hour, 4.02 seconds to 40, 8.93 seconds to 60, 2.32 to 60 foot, and 10.37 to 1/8 mile. So anybody who tells you that there's not really a difference between 28-inch tires going up to 32-inch tires, it's not true. I can definitely feel the difference going from the stock 28-inch tires to 32-inch tires, and everybody's going to feel more or less of a difference. I can tell you the tires that we have, the ITP Terra hooks, and the 14-inch Alba Racing wheels are best case scenario. They're roughly the same weight as the stock setup, and so really the only difference isn't rotating mass. There isn't a difference there. It's the overall diameter, which is going to make a difference relating to the gearing of the machine. It's just a bigger thing to turn. So we see those differences right here. On the pages, everywhere online, people say, hey, switch to one of these tunes and you'll get your time back and more. So we're going to put that to the test. Our first one is Cops. We're going to load that tune. We're going to give it a run, and we're going to see what difference it makes with the 32-inch wheels. Take a look. So after our first run, we have the first tuner on the board. With Cops, we have 1.59 seconds at 20 miles an hour, 4.08 to 40, 8.83 to 60, 2.33 seconds, the 60-foot time, and the 1/8 mile is 10.35. So we see it kind of all over the board. It's the same here, a little slower here. Picks up some speed here, and at the end it picked up a little speed. I can tell you that, again, if you go to part 1 and you look at the power curve, these numbers make sense on how it's falling a little flat right here. If you watch the video on where it's at on the power curve, this makes sense. And it goes in line with what we're seeing right here. So that being said, we're going to make our way down to Hess, and we're going to take a look to see what kind of numbers they put up. So we have the Hess numbers on the board. Over here we have 1.56 seconds to 20, 3.96 to 40, 8.88 to 60. The 60 foot is 2.30 and 1/8 mile at 10.34. I will tell you that did feel faster. When I was getting closer to 60 miles an hour, it felt like it was losing or evening out the power. But I will say down under 60, it really had some get up and go. If we're looking over stock, it's still slower than stock, but let's keep making our way down. The next one being Pwr Tune. Let's see what they do with their power. Okay, Okay, things are starting to get heated over here. We have Pwr Tune coming in with a very respectable time. 1.53 seconds to 20, 3.93 to 40, 8.66 to 60, 2.28 to 60 foot, and 10.27 to 1/8 mile. So if we look at these numbers, they beat all of the other competitors all the way through the range. And I will say, it felt very strong. I mean, it was a very strong run with that. And so I'm interested to see, compared to these times that we were down here, again, we kind of had two groups. FCP, they're going to round out the numbers here. And with FCP, by the way, we have their stage 3 tune. And so we are going to see how it runs. Let's take a look. Inching it out by a few hundredths of a second, we have FCP over here. So FCP put up 1.53 seconds to 20 miles an hour, 3.93 to 40, 8.48 to 60. Their 60-foot time was 2.28, and 1/8 mile at 10.25 seconds. So I will say, at the end, you really started to feel the FCP tune coming alive. Granted, that's at 60 miles an hour, and you don't typically see a lot of drive time at that kind of speed. FCP does have a drag tune, so these numbers would probably be vastly improved if we loaded the drag tune. But for all intents and purposes, I wanted to load the most mild tune that everybody could run just on a daily basis with trails, with mud, and kind of compare that. So every single one of these has a middle to upper line tune, and that's what we compared right here. And so looking at these numbers, we can see some comparisons between the 28-inch tires and 32-inch tires. So a couple closing thoughts as we take a look at all of these numbers and these different competitors. If you remember us talking about the power curve, so watching part 1, you can see the horsepower go up and then at the very end start to go down a little bit. One thing that I mentioned in that video, although there wasn't a huge increase in horsepower, we would start to see it on the actual road test here. And we do. In some cases, we see a pretty substantial increase over the stock numbers. And what that is each one of these companies, not only do they adjust like the air to fuel ratios and the timing on the machine to make some more horsepower, what they do is they change the shift points. So when they change the shift points, when it's going up at the top and then it starts to make its way down on horsepower, when it shifts, it is at a higher horsepower point to start that next gear than stock would be. And each one of these is very different. So when I'm making my way down the road, that's where you'll start to see some of these numbers fluctuate, where one will be very fast off the line, then in the middle it'll start to fall flat, then up on 60 miles an hour it'll start to pick up again. That's because all of these companies have different shift points that they use for their particular tunes, and it's going to make it feel faster or feel slower to you depending on how you ride your machine. So if you're spending a lot of time in this 40 to 60 mile an hour range, you may like one tune over the other. Me personally, I've run this machine for several months now, trying out all of these different tunes. And the biggest thing is I went to Moab about a month and a half ago, and I tried every type of climbing. I did rock climbing. I did the sand dunes. We did open road running. We did lots and lots of different riding with this machine between all of the different tunes. I will say my personal favorite is the Pwr Tune. The Pwr Tune, it makes really good power. The clutch engagement is really strong. And specifically for Moab, when you're in the sand dunes and you really need to be ripping those tires, or you're going up a very aggressive grade for rock climbing, the Pwr Tune really has it. But when you start to get onto the road and maybe you're driving back or you're doing some more mild driving, the Pwr Tune is a little much. I found myself very often having to use the paddle shifters to go to the next gear because it's so aggressive. I mean, any little bump on that throttle and it's bucking. It's very powerful and it's very touchy. The Hess Tune to me is a very close second. So what you see here on the numbers for the Hess Tune may be something that's not very aggressive, but they make a very mild tune for everybody out there. If you called them and told them, "Hey, I'm going to do a 0 to 60 run in 1/8 mile," I guarantee that they could tweak their tune a little bit to be as competitive with Pwr Tune and FCP as you see the numbers here. I think it would probably be a better split between these three companies. When I was in Moab and I knew I was going to be doing long driving on the road and just very chill driving, I was loading the Hess Tune. The Hess Tune, it has very comfortable shift points. The throttle response is toned back a lot compared to all of the other companies, to where you're not getting that bumpy throttle every time you hit a bump and the machine goes forward and back and forward and backwards and creates that bucking. So Hess is extremely refined. They're the most experienced out of anybody on this board as far as the Honda Talon goes. Pwr Tune has a lot of experience in Powersports and racing. So these two companies really are where it's at. Pwr Tune and Hess, they're the ones who make the best tunes. FCP to me is a very close third. So rounding out the top three, we got gold, silver, and bronze. FCP, they put up very respectable numbers. And if you talk to Scott, he's an extremely intelligent person. He knows these machines very well, specifically the Pioneer, but bleeding into the Talons a lot. He has a lot of overlap into the Talon. He has a lot of customers with the Talon, and his customer service is top notch. He works really hard to make sure that you have the tune that you require for your machine, the one that you want. And then there's Cops. In my opinion, Cops is way too expensive. You look at some of these numbers, and they're not even they're basically stock. In some cases, slower than stock. I would pass that up, and I would stick with one of these three companies: Hess, Pwr Tune, or FCP. As they say, numbers don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Take a look at the numbers and see what we got here. I would be comfortable with all of them. And I encourage y'all to reach out to these different companies and see what you think. I've talked to every one of the owners for all of these companies, and personality is all over the place. They are all different types of people. So I encourage you to reach out to them, get a feel for them, see how you like them, and then move forward based on these numbers. We thank you for joining us for this part 2. And again, we apologize for it taking so long to get to you. We hope you enjoyed it, and you will enjoy the content that we'll be coming out with in the very near future. Products for both this Talon and for the Honda Pioneer as we expand our business into other avenues. Thank you for joining.